Hi everyone, it's Michelle. Welcome to my channel and welcome to a very special video on how to make polymer clay embellishments, charms, and elements for your mixed media projects and journals. If you know me, you know that I'm passionate about paper and polymer clay, and when I combine the two, I'm always so excited at what I can discover. Today, we'll be working with some basic tools that you already have in your workshop or your studio and making absolutely beautiful things that will delight you and take your paper and polymer clay to a whole new level. As always, I appreciate you tuning in. My goal is always to inspire a new idea or tip or trick in your creativity. Okay, so I'm going to go over some of the basics that we're going to need for this project. And I'm going to talk about basics that the polymer clay crafter may already have, or the very beginner that doesn't have anything yet and doesn't want to spend any money on a craft project or polymer until they really know they like it. So I'm going to handle both. I have you covered, whether you're the very beginner or you're a polymer lover. So if you're a very beginner, I would say go to your kitchen, look for small cookie cutters. You may already have collections. Wilton makes wonderful little collections of cookie cutters that are sold at craft stores like Joann's and Michael's, and they usually have them by collection. A Valentine's might have a bunch of different hearts. Spring might have the butterfly and the flowers. That's actually where I got this. Very affordable, and you may already have some of these. Pampered Chef also has a collection of small cutters that I already had in my cabinet because when my kids were small, I used to cut out cheese shapes for them. So you may have these things already. If you are somebody who bakes a lot or you're already a polymer person, you may have collections of cookie cutters like this that have multiple sides that go down by size, little by in increments, and these are great investments if you're going to be making a lot of projects with different sizes, because the sizes go even to the small amount. More professional clay cookie cutters look like this, and they have a little button you can push so that the clay doesn't get stuck. And these were, I haven't even used these yet. They go with this little press here to make little jewels, and I'm going to try that out today. There's also silicone molds, which are very popular now with resin. You can also use molds for chocolate, and you can also find polymer clay molds online. These things aren't necessary. A cutter is the only thing that's necessary, and if you don't have that, you can use an X-Acto knife and just hand cut the shape. As far as making the impression, there are professional impression mats that you can get at the craft store for polymer clay or order online. They're also you can also use embossing mats that you use for paper. Those would work as well. And then rubber stamps. If you have rubber stamps, you can use that. And today we're going to do a little experiment with buttons. So most people have a rubber stamp that has a pattern on it, has a button, and either has an X-Acto knife or have a cookie cutter. So those are our basic things. The only other thing we're going to need are basic clay supplies. All you need is 1 or 2 bricks of polymer clay. I prefer Sculpey brand because it's easier for beginners. And some basic tools, which I have a video linked below that will go over all the basic tools you need for polymer clay. And guess what? You probably already have them, even if you aren't a polymer clay person. So check that link out below. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing you always have to do with polymer clay is condition your polymer clay. Conditioning just means that you are kneading it and making it soft enough to not only work easily within your hands and with the rollers, but you're also activating those polymer ingredients, which will make your projects much stronger. I've already conditioned the balls below. They come in bricks, so if they're already in a ball, you know I've already conditioned them. And what I've done is taken a little acrylic blocks like you use for a rubber stamp, and I pressed it down just to make it a little flat to give myself a good surface. And then I took my acrylic roller and rolled it to the size of a medallion. Now I'm taking a rubber stamp and I'm making the impression in the clay. How easy is that? That is like so easy. Everybody can do that. Then I'll take a little cookie cutter or clay cutter and cut the shape out. It's really as simple as that. You can take your blade to remove the medallion off your tile, or if you have one of those little metal shims that I showed in my basics tool video, you can use that to slide it off, kind of like a spatula. It's the same process over and over. The acrylic block, oh, here I'm using an old button. See, we don't need fancy impression tools. We have old buttons in our house. We can use those. You can also use wax seal tools to make impressions. Anything you have that you know will make an absolutely cool texture or impression, you can use. It's always the same process. The process is rolling a ball, pressing it down, rolling it out, and then making the impression and cutting. It's as simple as that. It's sort of like making Christmas cookies. Here's another old button. Here's another old button. I basically walked around my house and looked for a bunch of old buttons that I've had, and I'm using those to make impressions in this black clay. And I'm going to teach you how to use paint to bring those impressions out and make them come alive. Make them look like old coins, make them look like charms, make them look metallic. The basics, this step, the step of making impressions and cutting them out is really just, I call them a clay date. They're about playing and exploring and just seeing what you can come up with. And the beauty of this type of work is that if you don't like what you just did, you smush it up, you roll it out, and you try again. If your clay gets a little too soft, I recommend you letting it rest for a while so it can harden back up, or you can pop it in the refrigerator for 5 minutes and start working with it again. I use those little tiny eye screws that you can get at the craft store and stick those in the ones that I want to become charms. And for bigger medallions or bigger embellishments, I use eye hooks from the hardware store or the dollar store. Nothing needs to be that expensive. So here is that little button, and I think it looks just like a wax seal with the deer. I have different size tiles from the hardware store that I bake on, and as I get medallions and embellishments, popped out, I put them on my tile so that I can use them to bake later. Now you're seeing me roll a different shape. That's because I have this stamp that has it's like a specimen stamp, and I want to make little specimen plates. So I put the impression in the clay, and now I'm going to cut them out with my blade and make little tiny plates that I can make look like little patinaed metal plates that I can stick in my crafts. Yes, you saw me just slice it, and I have to throw that half away. Well, not really throw it away, just put it to the side and then re-roll it and just re-impression it again. Nothing, if you make a mistake with polymer clay, you just smush it up and start again. But those little plates are going to look super cool on mixed media projects. Sorry, my head is popping in there. Okay, so what are we going to play with now? I'm going to stick it down. I have kind of a big piece here. And I'm showing you that I've mixed a few colors together, just scraps I had. And it makes sort of a little bit of a marbling effect, which can look really cool in the background as well. This is a polymer clay item. It is a texture mat that you roll on top to get amazing textures. But if you're a paper person, you can also use embossing folders. I love them because you just roll it out on a sheet of clay, and then you take your little cutters and you start picking out spaces of the texture that you want to highlight, that you want to isolate. And I love hearts. Hearts are wonderful. They can go in Happy Mail. They can go in projects. You can hand them out to people. They can be little random acts of kindness. You can leave them out in the world. Just fun little things. I have all sorts of cutters that I have acquired over the years. Some of them are from the baking section. Some of them are professional polymer clay tools, but you don't need that. You can, if you're just trying this class out for the first time and seeing if you like it, you can just hand cut things with blades or a craft knife. You can use tiny cookie cutters. There is nothing that says that you have to have all the tools to try a project out. All you really need is the polymer clay, your hands, and a little bit of ingenuity. So I've just cut a whole bunch of little shapes out. I'm cleaning out my workspace, and I'm just having so much fun playing around, seeing what looks good. It's really relaxing. The one thing I have found about doing a project like this is that using your hands really relaxes you. It focuses your mind and opens you to the possibility of, hey, what would this look like? And what would this stamp do? And how can I cut this? And time just flies by, and I find it to be so cathartic. So you're just seeing me playing around, taking different colors. I like dark colors because when we put the paint on, those dark colors are going to offer excellent contrast. Dark greens, browns, blacks. But if you don't have that, don't worry about it, because you're going to see me using some light clay to show you how you can handle that as well. But dark, just for the beginner, is a great way to get good contrast when we're talking about these types of projects. So I'm now using a stamp set I have for my paper crafting that is all like mailing words and textures. You know, they're cancellation stamps, they're handwritten words, they're labels. And for me, I'm going to be using these embellishments with my paper projects. So I want them to sort of have that feel. But let's say you were making these things for other reasons. You know, maybe you were making some really natural type things. You could use stamps of trees and leaves and whatever subject matter is consistent with what you do in your world or what you like in your world. And then last but not least, I'm taking a needle tool and I'm making holes in some of these because I want them to be charms and I want to be able to hang them on string. You can use a toothpick if you don't have a needle tool. Just make sure you make a nice clean hole. And then my other tip is tiny straws. Most of us don't have straws in our world anymore, but I still have a few kicking around. And straws make absolutely perfect holes. And I have a few small ones left that I've been hoarding. So just sticking a straw in and, you know, tweaking it around, spinning it around will make a beautiful hole. And then that is literally ready to go into the oven. How easy was that, right? The last thing I would say is take a toothbrush, not one you've used, a new one, get it at the dollar store, and make texture. Texture is fabulous because the paint goes into all those little holes. So now let's see what else we can make. So I've decided that I want to work a lot with medallions. So one of the ways that you can make a circle without having a round cookie cutter is simply by taking a polymer clay ball that you've rolled and smoothed out, and then taking a little acrylic block like you have for stamping and putting even pressure pressing down. It makes a perfect circle, as you can see. And then I just use a button or whatever it is I'm making an impression with, and then I grab a little hook, little eye hook that you can get at the craft store, and I just slip those in the edge. I love this little vintage deer button because it looks a little bit like a wax seal. So I'm using a lot of buttons here and just making medallions. Now I've decided I want to make a little plate that says fragile on it. So I just roll out, you know, a shape, take the fragile stamp and stamp it in, and now I'm adding texture with my toothbrush. All those tiny little holes are going to suck that paint in and make it look authentic and old. Now let's work with silicone molds. Now, There are fancy ones you can buy for polymer clay. I have some of those, but the one you're looking at right now is from the food department of the craft store in the candy making section. You can use candy making molds for your polymer clay. They have to be flexible enough to pop the polymer clay out, so that's why I suggest silicone. I'm not sure that plastic candy molds will be pliable enough, but if you have some, you could always give it a try. So I'm going to pop these out, and as you can see, they're like little tiny medallions that I'm thinking I'm going to add on top of collage. So I'm not going to do anything to them other than just pop out their shape right now. And I love their texture. I love their lines. And again, I'm going to come back through with my straw and my needle tool, and I'm going to make little holes for them so that I can, once again, make them into charms and embellishments that I can hang from string or chain. And I'm just having so much fun. In one afternoon, you can make so many items. And even if you didn't do the paint in one sitting, you could pop trays of these in your oven and get them ready and cool them down and have them ready on the go for whatever project you wanted to do. And you could just take out your paint whenever you wanted one. So you don't even have to finish the entire project in one sitting. You can just do this part and then let them sit. They don't go bad. So that's the fun of it. Okay, so you've seen me make medallions now for the purpose of making charms and embellishments for different things. And now I'm going to make something a little different, something more for my collage work and for my journals. I'm just going to roll out these smooth shapes that are reminiscent of maybe pieces of leather or artifacts. And I'm just going to add text and impressions to them. And if you're not a paper person or a mixed media person, you might be thinking, well, I'm not sure how I would use this. But you could paint a cardboard box, like a little cardboard box you have, a gift box, or perhaps a wooden box, and then add this to the top and add great interest to that box. Or the front of a journal, you could add these to fronts of journals on the cover and they make them so interesting. It's just another way to play and to bring 3D into your artwork. So once all of these are done, they'll all be on their tiles and they'll be ready for the oven. You're just going to take those tiles and pop them in the oven at 275 degrees, or whatever is the type of clay you're using. You have to check the package to see what the temperature is. It does vary and you can burn your clay. So make sure you look at the package before you throw the package away so you'll know what temperature to bake your items at. The rule of thumb is you bake for 15 minutes for every 1/4 inch of thickness. Most of these medallions are 1/4 inch, so I will only be baking for probably about 20 minutes. And that'll be fine. I'm at 275 degrees because that is the temperature that Sculpey bakes at. Each brand has a different temperature. 275 is the absolute top. So some will bake at lower temperatures and you could burn your projects. So make sure to check your package before you put it in your oven. Some people prefer not to use their oven and use a little toaster oven or a dedicated oven for their clay. I have researched the safety of polymer clay and I am absolutely fine with doing it in my oven, but it's whatever you're comfortable with. So now that the clay is out of the oven, I'm going to put them in an ice bath. This is a step that a lot of people don't know about, but I discovered probably early on in my polymer clay adventure. When clay comes out of the oven, it's kind of flexible. See that? And it's easily broken. It's the most vulnerable time for polymer clay is when it first comes out of the oven. And you can let it sit and cool on the top of your oven for hours until it's finally cool enough to work with. Or you can put it in an ice bath. An ice bath not only renders the polymer clay ready to be painted and used immediately, but there's also some circles that believe that it makes it harder because it seizes and it makes the molecules contract so fast that it makes the polymer clay a little bit more strong and dense. Do I know if this is true? No. Do I like doing it anyway? Yes. Mostly I like it because I'm not a patient person. So now they're all hard and dry and ready for the next step. And basically what I am going to do is I am going to start showing you how you can make the most of those textures through the use of paint. So I have a few little products here. I'm just using acrylic paint, but this paint right here in particular is my favorite. It's the Deco Art Antiquing Cream, and it has this green patina that is absolutely amazing. I also have a couple of their oxides, and I'm showing you a copper acrylic paint. I will list the paints below, but nothing here is that special. The paint I'm pouring right now is like from the hobby store, and it's like $1 each. It might be like Apple Barrel or, your basic paints. The golden paints are a little bit more expensive, and you could definitely invest in them if you wanted, but you don't need to. So here I am. I'm going to show you a few of the brushes I use. I like to have a flat brush. I like to have a brush with a really fine tip so I can get paint in those crevices. And then I like to have like sort of a flat tip one. But really any brushes will do. I'm going to tell you my preferences, but honestly, you can use what you have. So I'm going to, just like watercolor, I'm going to really water down that paint. And I'm going to just slap it on there. I'm not really being all that careful. I'm trying to get it in all the crevices and the cracks. I'm trying to bring out all that writing that I stamped in. And I'm just going to do that. Now this light piece, look how it's going to react. That acrylic paint is going to stain that tan immediately. And I'm really trying to get that paint to get in there. I realize I need some more water. When you add just a little bit of water to the paint, you're going to see it really gets in those cracks. And you're going to see this as I come. So now I'm buffing out some of the paint, so the top paint that I put on the first piece. And now I'm going to add another layer. And I think this is where you're going to see me add some water. And you can see how water really makes that color or that pigment just spread right into the cracks. Those words really come alive. And I usually like to do this on my second coat. The first coat has now lined the bottom of those crevices, and now this really light watery paint is really going to fill those cracks. And you can see it, can't you? Everything gets really dark. You can see the writing getting really dark where I'm putting that really watered down paint on top of it. And this process isn't hard. It just is a matter of painting, letting it dry, and painting some more. You're layering the pigments. Yes, some people put the paint on full strength and just wipe it off, and you can do that if you just want a very light staining. But I'm really wanting these crevices to get full. So here I'm trying something different. I'm using the more metallic paint because I want to highlight that piece. And here I'm going to use the patina paint. And my goal for the patina paint is to start laying down those layers that I'm going to build upon with metallics and green. I guess I didn't just use the patina, I used the metal. It's hard when you're doing a voiceover. Sometimes you can't see very well what you're doing. Okay, this is a tan, and this milky color really fills in black. Really, really good. It's all about the contrast. If you're using a light color clay, you definitely want a black. You want black to fill in the cracks. And if you're using a really dark clay, you want the light to fill in the cracks. I absolutely love this blue patina paint. It just, to me, it's got that look of like copper that has rusted, not rusted, but kind of given that verdigris over the years. On black clay, it just really pops. And now I'm working, remember the little fragile word that I made? Now I want to make this come alive. So this is going to be a series of layers of paint. And again, none of this is hard. And it's playing. It's watching If you're used to mixed media, this is where my paper people will really shine, because if you're used to working with materials for mixed media, you're used to playing and watching how things react. And that's all this is. Now, if you're a clay person and paint isn't your wheelhouse, just be patient, because you can't screw it up. The worst that happens is you don't like it, and you just take a cotton ball with some alcohol and you wipe it off. You can probably wipe it off with just water. If it's still wet, you can wipe a lot of this off with just water and a rag. But if it gets kind of on the dry side, you could use alcohol. Acrylic ink on polymer clay is not permanent. So ditch the fear and just play. That's the whole thing. Just enjoy, experiment, layer, and relax and see what happens. Watch the magic. That's the whole thing. Is sometimes it's great not going in with a plan and not knowing how something will come out and watching the magic develop. And that's all you're seeing me do right here. So once you have your first couple of layers of that base color of paint, like the black or the light, and it's in all of those crevices, then you can start building upon that. Those paints should be dry, and you can go with your heat gun and dry them to get them a little quicker. But now you can see here I'm adding some metallic to this piece. I want to start giving it dimension. I want it to start looking like it's an old metal piece that developed a green patina over the years. And I'm just lightly brushing the gold on some of the higher ridges to sort of just catch that. And you're going to see that I start doing this with all the pieces. Each one is different. I'm going to look at that piece, and this is where you're just going to have to listen to your gut. You're going to say, do I want a little highlight here with some metallic? Do I want a little green there with the patina? Maybe you want a little black in there to make it look dirty or grungy. You could add some brown or some burnt umber to make it look a little soiled. There's so many different colors. You can maybe find something that kind of looks like rust. It's about looking through your paints and seeing what colors you can add to your projects to really bring life to them and new dimension. The success of your project depends on you letting the layers dry. So what I like is if you make a dozen pieces, you can always be starting new ones while the ones that have several layers dry. As you're seeing here, I'm actually coating 2 pieces with really thick paint. So now you're going to see me just starting a new batch of little ones, like the charms, the small items that I did with the buttons that make it look like, little charms that could be like old gold medallions or wax seals. And you're going to see that my first coating on these is going to be some metallics, some of the patina paint, and I'm really just trying to coat them. I'm not going to even coat all of it. Maybe I just want to coat the highlights. Maybe I want to coat half and accentuate one part of that charm. Sometimes leaving out color is as powerful as adding it in. Again, it's all playing and it's all seeing how things react on your projects. So I think you can see how the paint's responding. I had 4 colors of acrylic paints that I kind of used as my palette for this, but you're not limited to any color palette. You can do whatever colors float your boat. So now I think you have the basics so far. It's the original layer, then an additional layer, then some additional colors, and now we're going to buff it. Buffing it basically is taking a little rag and going on your project and removing some of the paint in areas, either to bring out some highlights or lowlights, to maybe make something look a little worn and more vintage. And it's really the last step in really trying to bring your piece and finish it off. The buffing really blends it all together, I guess is the point. And that's where, if maybe you are really heavy-handed somewhere, you can take a little color away. If perhaps you obscured a letter, you can rub it off and just repair that letter like you're seeing me do right here. Buffing is sort of like the last step before we varnish. So it's really where you're taking your eye and you're carefully saying, you know, is there anything I need to add or take away from this project? I love this piece. Something about the way the colors blended made this sort of new green that really is funky cool to me, and I'm just going to buff it, and to me, I just love the way that looks. Could I replicate it exactly the same way again? Probably not, but that's the beauty of these things, is everything is so original when you're making it yourself. Okay, the paint's done, the paint's dry, we've buffed. It's time for the gilding wax. Oh, I love the gilding wax. I love the gilding wax because it's dry and I can make the edges look like coins, and I can just float my fingers gently on the top and highlight little tiny areas that I want the eye to be more attracted to. I can start controlling where the focal point is by buffing some colors out, adding some gilding wax in. This is where you really can finish off the piece and make it go from that's cool to wow. It's where you can take something that's flat and really add dimension to it. I just love it. Gilding wax is very inexpensive. I have had this pot of gilding wax probably for 5 years now. You don't use much. I have 3 colors. It's a terrific thing to invest in. But if you don't have any, you can use metallic acrylic paint. And now the last step, which is varnishing. DuraClear Satin Varnish from Deco Art is the #1 product I would say for polymer clay. You have to be very careful with polymer clay varnishes because if it is acetone based or has certain chemicals, it will react. You could also use Mod Podge as well. That is also safe. Keep in mind, every layer of paint should be 100% dry, and you want to varnish with the lightest of touches because you don't want to smear the paint. And because acrylic is a water-based paint, if you put too much varnish on, you are going to smear it. So just have a nice little light touch. You can even dab it on if you choose. Okay, so now I've shown you the basic shapes. I've made you acquainted with how you can use cookie cutters and simple stamps to make shapes that are easy, fun, and very basic. But now let's level up. Let's take our little projects and make them even more special. So after making all these basic shapes, I had an idea in my head. I didn't know if I could make it happen, but the acorn on the right was really what I was picturing. I was really picturing, how do I take these basic shapes and really make them into something special? So what I decided to do was to combine 2 things I already knew worked: the flat shapes and the silicone shapes. And I added them together. I put a big silicone 3-dimensional object, the acorn, on top of a flat background. I did the same stamping, and I thought, if I add paint and wax and highlights, can I really make this look like, I don't know, something really special on a book? Something like a book plate like I've never seen before. Now, you don't need a silicone mold. You can hand shape the item that you want to put on top of the flat background. And making the 2 combine really is just a matter of taking your rubber stamp and gently making impressions on the surface of the 3D object so they blend in with the background. And here you're going to see me adding all sorts of layers of paint. I also experimented with mixing old scrap pieces of clay. Right here you'll see the clay in the background is a mixture of greens and just scrap clay I had that I marbled together. It almost gives the impression of marbled paper. So then when you add the black ink in the gold ink, it really combines for a really special effect. I had so much fun just using those same techniques that I used at the beginning of this video. Light layers of watered down ink or acrylic paint, drying and then adding on top of that some metallic paint, buffing out areas, and of course adding gilding wax around the edges. All of these things combined on these more 3D shapes really made some effective embellishments that I'm so excited to use either on tags or on the front of covers. There's so many things I can think about doing with these really cool embellishments. I just think they're going to give my projects a more of a 3D look, and they're going to really, I think, give a different feeling. The materials are going to give a really rich feeling to my projects as well. So as you continue to watch, you're going to see a few things I'd like to sort of bring out. You can see on this acorn, the little gold and the black that's in the texture, that's just from a toothbrush. And the cap is just done with gilding wax. Very effective, very cool, a little bit rustic, a little vintage and grungy, and really so simple to do. To source your silicone shapes, if you want to order them online, I'll put some links below. But you can use candy making shapes. There are actual silicone shapes that are made for polymer clay, and now there are so many molds for resin. The only thing that's important is that you make sure it's flexible so you can pop them out. Here I've taken a silicone mold and I've popped out some butterflies and then placed them on backgrounds, flat backgrounds with rubber stamping script in the back. And I found the colors, I tried to do two different looks. One was sort of the dark, moody, grungy journal colors I kind of tend to like this one here. I like that kind of like gold and brown, earthy colors. And then the other one, the other butterfly, I tried to use yellows and blues and lighten them up. I can so see the warmer colors in a fall journal. And the cooler colors maybe in something more summerish. I could even see them as on some sort of a closure that comes on and off of the book. So let's just watch some of these little things come to life. I hope you enjoy seeing the basic techniques used over and over, but in different ways, in different colors, you'll get different effects. And with that, they're done. I have a variety of flat and 3D shapes, some embellishments, some charms, some coins, plenty of little things to mix into my mixed media and junk journaling projects. I hope watching gave you an idea of the materials you will need, the steps that will take you from the beginning to the end, and maybe some ideas for colors and the way to blend and highlight. And I hope that you'll enjoy getting your hands in some clay and playing with some color choices and making results that are all your own. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate you watching. And until the next time, I hope you'll take a chance and be creative. Bye.